Well, welcome back to another episode of the Always About People show. I'm your host, Chris Allen, and we've got another great one for you today. We are live, and so whether you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, we would love to engage with you. We would prefer that it be more of a dialogue than a monologue, and so we want to encourage you to send in comments, ask questions, respond to things. And so here on the Always About People show, we continue to try and cover topics related to people. As we travel the country, work with different leaders, work with different organizations, we hear the topics that people want to talk about. We hear the issues and the challenges that individuals are experiencing. And today is no outlier. We want to actually go to part 2. We want to expand the content that we started in our last show on the 10 simple ways to manage the stress you feel. Obviously, we only got through part of it because there's so much content to digest. But we have Stevie back with us for part 2. If you missed part 1, don't stop this. Listen to this one. We're going to give you a recap of part 1. You can always go back and listen to it. But Stevie Borne is in the house again today. She's a professional speaker, coach, and mental health advocate. Through her experiences in the mental health industry, both as a patient and a parent, she's discovered proven strategies to help people navigate mental illness with less stress and more joy. And I am just honored to have Stevie in the studio with us. I guess it's the studio. We'll call this a studio, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
A virtual studio. It's like the virtual workplace. But in our first episode, part 1, we got through 5 of 10 practical, simple ways to manage the stress you feel. In the first episode, Stevie gave us a little bit of her story and background of what makes her an expert. I guess you could call it that. It sounds a little backwards, but maybe somebody who's experienced this before. So she is an experienced expert because she's walked through it herself. And yet, Stevie, what we are seeing across the country is that leaders and employees alike are dealing with mental health issues that I've never seen to this extent before. Now, not that they didn't exist, but it feels like the last couple of years have heightened an awareness maybe, or heightened the prevalence of what we're seeing. Would you agree with that?
I would say it's both. I would
Okay.
say, especially when COVID hit, that increased a lot of the mental health challenges that people may have already had, or maybe it triggered some new things that people hadn't experienced before. Um, as well as one of the benefits I think that's come in the last few years are the increased conversations that we have around mental health. And there's a variety of organizations that are trying to make it okay to
Yeah.
start talking about mental health instead of being something that you're ashamed of or afraid of, which I experienced for many years. I didn't want to talk about my struggles because I felt it made me weak, especially as a leader. I didn't want anybody to know that I struggled because I thought they would lose confidence in me as their leader.
Yeah. So like the assumption that as a leader, I'm supposed to have all my stuff together. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Otherwise, why would people follow me if I'm not perfect? You
Mm,
know, that false assumption that we sometimes find ourselves believing.
yeah. I think, Stevie, you just gave me an idea for another episode on the stuff leaders don't have together.
Ah,
Because I think that mental health is just one of many.
mhm.
The other one we see is that I'm supposed to know everything. So we'll have to do
Yeah.
another episode. Um, I think for our guests who are just catching up with us right now, Stevie, maybe you can do an overview of the first 5 simple ways that you gave us in part 1. Maybe just give us an overview and a couple comments, and then we'll spend the majority of our time today in part 2 going through 6 through 10. Can you do that?
Absolutely. I'm happy to.
Awesome.
So the first 5, I'll quickly summarize, as Chris said. The first one is to slow down. And that for some of us is pretty difficult, but it's simply just sometimes you need to slow down in order to rejuvenate and get more energy so that then you can keep going.
Hmm.
The second one is to rest responsibly. So it might seem like an oxymoron that I'm telling you to slow down and then I'm saying, but do it responsibly. And simply what I mean by that is choose your relaxation activities wisely so that they refresh you without you losing the sense of time and then coming back to reality going, oh my gosh, I just wasted 3 hours. Because then you've kind of undone the whole benefit of resting. So rest responsibly. Number 3 is to turn off the notifications on your phone, on your smartwatch, but turn off those constant interruptions that can not only distract us, but can also increase our stress. Number 4, sleep. Protect your sleep. And one of the ways that I described doing that was to create a very simple, regular bedtime routine. And then the 5th one that we talked about last time was to practice gratitude and really thinking about things that you are grateful for in your life. Or maybe if you're really stressed out and you don't feel very grateful for much, start to look outside of yourself
Yeah.
and notice something in your surroundings that you can be grateful for. The practice of gratitude releases serotonin, which is a chemical in our brain that helps us manage our emotions and feel happy. And so as a
Yeah.
result, it can also help improve our sleep and reduce our stress. So those were the first 5 that we talked about last time.
Awesome. Well, I so enjoyed the show, and part one, the list was helpful. We got into a great conversation around sleep routines. I think that the notification, your number 3, with so many people wearing smartwatches around their wrists that buzz and ding and ping, it's like we are constantly bombarded.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these things can create anxiety. But gosh, no better time than right now to practice this art of gratitude as well, and how
Absolutely.
that can rewire the pathways in our brains. So, thank you for the first 5. I'm anxiously awaiting the next 5. Give us number 6.
All right. Well, this one requires a little bit of audience participation.
Ooh, I like it.
So if you're watching live, great. I invite you to join us. But for now, I'm going to direct Chris through this activity because my 6th tip is something very simple, and it is simply to breathe. Now, we all obviously are breathing all the time, but this is a very intentional breathing exercise. I call it square breathing. Some people also refer to it as box breathing. And
Hmm.
I like to say square breathing because it's easy for me to remember how it goes. And to just picture breathing your way around a box. So here's how it works. I'll explain it and then we'll practice it a couple of times. And then I'll share why it's so beneficial to reduce our stress. So we are going to breathe in for the count of 4. And so it's going to be like we're going up one side of our box. So we'll breathe in for the count of 4. And then as we go across the top of our box, we're going to just hold our breath for the count of 4. And then as we go down this side of the box, we're going to breathe out for the count of 4. And then we're going to just hold our breath again for the count of 4 as we go across our box bottom. So we're just going to go in, hold, breathe out, hold. And that's all that it takes. Just on the
Cool.
count of 4,
So,
because a
so
square has
I was
4.
curious. Like every once in a while, my watch will tell me, "Hey, breathe,"
Yes.
which I think is so fascinating because then I realize, oh my gosh, you know what? I'm not breathing effectively. So, all
Right.
right, I'm willing to practice.
Okay, so we're going to do a couple of rounds. The first one, I'll talk as we go through it. And the second one, I'll just use the hand motions. Are you ready?
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, so we're going to breathe in for the count of 4 as we go up one side of our square. So
Okay.
breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4. Now breathe out. And then hold your breath. All right, I'm not going to talk this time. We're just going to breathe in, hold, breathe out, and hold. So that is something so simple. We can do it anytime, anywhere. It doesn't take any special activity. Like
Hmm.
there's no special tools. And because I think of it as a square, it's easy to remember 4 sides and you
Yeah.
count to 4.
So Stevie, I'm curious. I mean, is it obviously oxygen and oxygenating your brain and releasing carbon dioxide and all that stuff is health. Like that's life. But is there something tied to anxiety where we people, Chris, forgets to breathe?
Absolutely. As we become anxious, our breathing tends to become very shallow and it usually increases in speed.
Hmm.
And we are typically not at all aware of it until we are so anxious that we feel really uptight. And then we're like, oh my gosh, I guess I'm not really
Yeah.
breathing, or it's really shallow breathing. And when you do an activity like square breathing, it activates a part of our nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system.
Mhm.
And that part of our nervous system is actually responsible for keeping us calm. And so as we start to breathe intentionally, that gets activated. And what's really fascinating about our nervous system is we have another part of our nervous system that helps keep us alive in times of danger. And
Yep.
that's the sympathetic part of our nervous system. And so it's that fight or flight response. And the thing is, your body can only have one of them activated at once. So
Mhm.
when we're really stressed out, the sympathetic nervous system is going like crazy. And as we start to breathe, it starts to deactivate and we start to activate the part of our nervous system that will naturally calm us down.
Hmm.
Now, you won't feel calm instantly. You absolutely will not feel calm instantly, but your nervous system is actually starting to do the work for you. And if you stick with a breathing activity, I can promise you, based on personal experience,
Yeah.
that eventually you will start to feel a little bit calmer.
Hmm.
And I've
I love
seen it
that.
in action in myself and in other people. I know people who have extreme anxiety, and they will begin to use this when they're in a situation and they just feel themselves starting to feel tense.
Yeah. Well, I was even just thinking about anaerobic versus aerobic exercise.
Mhm.
And I used to run track, and the gun would go off for the sprint, and you're not thinking about breathing. I mean, you're
Yeah.
breathing
You're
as
thinking about
quickly as
running
you,
as fast as
yeah,
possible.
you're just like running. And then you get to the end of it and you're like, I really only ran 100 yards or 200 yards. But then your breathing is so taxed
Mhm.
that then it takes this long period of time to even get back
Right,
oxygenated.
right, right.
And so if we could relate stress in our lives
Mhm.
to the running of a sprint
Absolutely.
or the running from a bear or any other frightful situation, um, getting back into a place where you're breathing in a healthy way. I
Mhm.
get it. I get it
Yeah.
conceptually. So
And
learn to breathe.
I would also add to that, I
Yeah,
think many of us go through life sprinting, but we are running the distance of a marathon. And so
I
we're not
agree.
pacing ourselves. We're not breathing. We're not taking care of ourselves. We are sprinting all out over 26.2 miles instead of 100 yards.
Well, and if we could just take that one step further, it's impossible to sprint for our entire lives.
Mhm.
So if you're going at a pace of a sprint for a long period of time, the only place for your body to catch up is to crash. And
Absolutely.
so there's a sprint and then a crash and then a sprint and then a crash. So, the way to think about it would be the marathoner who hits the wall or
Absolutely.
the 800-meter where there's that death that happens
Yeah.
as you're finishing that race, and
Mhm.
or the 400 in an all-out sprint where the last 100 is just brutal.
Yep.
Um, Again, we've now found ways to relate this back to running somehow, but I think the point is well made. So learn to breathe, breathe the box, breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold, 4 seconds each.
Yep. Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, number 7.
Number 7 is one that I personally struggle with, but that's one of the reasons I wanted to share it.
Yeah.
And that is to give yourself grace.
What? What does that mean?
I know, right? Because what I've discovered in my own life is that sometimes I set higher expectations for myself than what the people around me have set for me. And
Mm,
as a result, my stress level increases because I'm trying to meet these really high expectations that are sometimes not even realistic, but more importantly, they're misaligned with what the people around me are expecting of me.
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
give yourself grace. And
Mm.
admittedly, I'm stealing that one from my therapist because it's been a topic of conversation in my own personal therapy sessions this fall, especially as I've learned how to embrace that one tip, and it has helped reduce my stress, but it's also really challenging.
Well, but if we could dig just a little deeper, in order to give myself grace, that means that I have to be okay with some form of failure. Because like that idea of grace is that I I can't do something. I can't live up to it. I can't live up to the expectation. I For some reason there's a perception that I'm failing, and I have to be okay with that in order to give myself some form of grace. Is that
Well,
true?
I would maybe reframe it.
Okay.
Another way to consider it would be to pause and instead just really honestly ask yourself, what are the expectations of the people around me
Hmm.
that I'm interacting with? And am I meeting those expectations compared to what are the expectations I'm setting of myself?
Yeah.
And so it may not necessarily be failure, it could simply be realigning.
Mm.
So like for instance in my work, I was on a particular project and I had set these really high expectations for some deliverables for this client that I was responsible for. And I was incredibly stressed. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't taking care of myself, and I definitely was not breathing much. Um, and I was so stressed out. And the conversation went something like, well, okay, Stevie, those are your expectations of how this should go. What are the expectations of the client? And I thought about it. And the client was expecting something around here. And that
Yeah.
wasn't a bad thing. That was the reality of the situation. And then my therapist said, and what is the expectation of your consulting company? And I said, well, it's probably like around here. Like we have higher expectations than the client. But she
Mhm.
said, okay, Stevie, but notice where your hands are. Like
Mhm.
your expectation is still so much higher than anyone else. What would it be like if you just took it down a little bit and lived more in the expectation of those around you?
Hmm. That's
So it
good.
wasn't necessarily that it was failure. I mean, some people may think of it that way. I I chose to think of it as reevaluating my expectations of the situation and my results in that situation. And it reduced a lot of my stress.
Yeah. Well, I think my biggest takeaway from that conversation is even it's the need to reframe the definition of failure, because
Absolutely.
I could easily say that if my expectation was here and I lowered my expectation.
That you have failed. Yeah. And so many times we go there, and I would encourage you to say, but have I really failed if I've met the expectations of everyone else
Yep.
that I was doing this work for?
Yeah. That's
And
good.
maybe internally your answer is still yes. for me, that was a powerful way to realize I can still be successful by lowering my expectations to something that's more realistic,
Hmm.
given the time and the resources that I have to complete this particular project.
I love it. It's helpful. All right. Number 8.
So, number 8 is to take a break from the news and from social media.
No way.
Absolutely. And I'm going to challenge or encourage, depending on how people want to take it a little bit further and make it so that you delete those apps on your phone.
Ooh.
Or
Now
if you're
you're
not quite
asking.
ready to
Now
go
you're
that,
asking a lot.
if you're not quite ready to go to that, you could consider logging out and forcing yourself to log in every time you want to use them. So
That's a
make the
pain.
barrier exactly. It's a real pain. And yet, think about, when was the last time that you read the news and you walked away feeling amazing?
Listen, you're right on. I mean, I think that this is an issue uh, outside of even our conversation on this show. We have so much negativity that's being spread. It's no wonder that people are in places of anxiety and stress.
Absolutely. Well, and even on the flip side, when you look at social media, um, there are times, at least in my life, maybe you've experienced it or some of the people that are watching, but I'll scroll through Facebook and I'll be looking at all the cool things that other people have been posting about. And I'm like, oh, my life isn't that cool. Oh, I
Comparison.
should have done that. Oh, I should have posted the best family Christmas picture I could find. I'm such a terrible person that I didn't think to do that. So here I am scrolling something positive,
Yeah.
but I start to internalize some negative messaging about that, which then can increase my stress.
Hmm.
So that's why I kind of group them together in terms of, it's easy to say, well, the news, it's all negative. But social media, sometimes we can start to spin even positive things that people are sharing on social media. And we can start to feel really bad about ourselves because we're comparing our experience to what we're seeing people post on social media, which, don't get me started on social media and how we always only post awesome things, even if our life is not going awesome.
Yeah.
It's just that um, that persona that we want to show out on social media.
Yeah. No, I think that that's really helpful. I would say that there seems to be sort of an epidemic across our culture of comparison, and
Absolutely.
over the past couple years, a fascination with news and data and updates. Now we have the ability to get information, like instantaneous
Yep.
information.
Yep.
And so, um, one of my fascinations is we'll get instantaneous information on issues that are happening in completely other parts of the world,
Hmm.
and it affects our emotional state where we are. And
Absolutely.
so we will begin to assume that the world has gotten much worse
Hmm.
because of now our immediate access to information, when in reality, a lot of this stuff has been going on forever.
Hmm.
We just never heard about it within 10 seconds and
Exactly.
or ever. And
Hmm.
so again, most people didn't read about it until tomorrow's newspaper in the city in which they live. And
Right.
so I just think that it's added to the stress that all of us are feeling. I love your suggestion to, if you're not going to sort of turn it off or take it off your phone, log out,
Hmm.
because I mean, shoot, I can't even remember my passwords. So
I can't either. That's why I have, the Face ID on my phone.
yeah.
Um, so the other way that you could do that, again, if you're not quite ready to take that step, perhaps you want to just give yourself a specific time of day and you set a timer and say, for the
Mm,
next 5 minutes, I'm going to read the news, or for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to scroll Facebook and Instagram. And when your timer goes off, you have to exercise the discipline to move on. So,
yeah.
a few
Love that.
different ways that you could ease in to this particular tip because I know it can be jarring to just say, take a break.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. All right, number 9.
Number 9 is to exercise.
So you got to like what? I have to go run an 800 or a
You do not.
marathon?
You do not.
Oh, okay.
Because really, when I say exercise, I simply mean move your body. And that can be something as simple as getting up between meetings and walking around your house or your apartment.
Yeah.
Going out and walking around the block over your lunch. For those of us that are working from home, it doesn't have to be 45 minutes of intense cardio at the gym, but getting your body moving is so beneficial for helping reduce that stress. I often say it helps me burn off that stressful energy, and it can be really simple things.
Oh, one thought, maybe a question too, is I found myself or find myself going from one Zoom meeting to another Zoom meeting to another Zoom meeting. And at times I've scheduled myself back to back to back without any time in between. You have any advice on that?
Well, so I'm at a standing desk right now. And so I'm not sure if you can really tell that I'm like moving right now,
And I
but
am too.
I'm actually doing high knee raises. And like that's not super distracting. Like you can kind of see it.
Well, I'm running.
You're like Rocky now.
Yeah.
But my point is, I mean, there's simple things you can do. You could just do some little stretches. Yeah, there's a lot of things you can do while you're just standing here.
Yeah.
Or even between breaks, like you shut down a Zoom meeting and you walk away to get a glass of water or something. And you let the people know, I'm just taking a bio break. I'll be right back. You force yourself to do one of those just quick breaks in between each meeting. So I think there's strategies we can use. We just have to be intentional about doing it. And although I've loved working from home, I miss being in an office where I had to walk from conference room to conference room.
Yep.
Because it forced me to actually move between meetings. And I remember sometimes I would have a back-to-back meeting in the same conference room and I'd be like, oh, this is so hard. I'm just sitting for 2 solid hours.
Yeah.
And now we do that to ourselves. Only often it's much more than just 2 solid hours. So
That's
it
good.
takes discipline to just get up. And it can even be something as simple as you shut down one Zoom meeting and you like literally just walk around your office a little bit. And then you're like, okay.
All right. I love it. That's good. All right. We're on to our final one.
Our final one. And this, I think, can be especially difficult. And that is to get professional help. And I would say get professional help, whether you feel like you need it or not. Sometimes people will say to me, well, I don't know how to find a counselor. I don't know how to find a therapist. One of the easiest ways to do that is to go to psychologytoday.com. Pretty easy to remember, psychologytoday.com. You can do searches based on your location, based on certain characteristics of the therapist. Like maybe you want to only meet with a male therapist, or maybe you want to meet with somebody who specializes in a certain type of therapy. But getting professional help is absolutely critical. And I mean, I'm actually a firm believer that everybody should see a therapist, even if you see a therapist once a month. I have a friend, a colleague of mine, and he said, I still check in with my therapist on a quarterly basis. And if that check-in doesn't go well, then we switch it to a monthly basis. And then when things are back under control, it goes back to quarterly. So it doesn't have to be this massive, I go every single week and I'm pouring out my soul to this stranger. That's not the way therapy works.
Yeah. Well, again, we don't think of mental health in the same way that we think of physical health.
Absolutely.
So many people will do an annual physical just
Mhm.
to make sure that, hey, I'm going to get some blood work done. I'm going to check everything. But then if I get sick, there might be an immediate need to go to a doctor where you might either get a quick fix or see them, multiple times in a quick short amount of time. But with mental health, we tend to be probably like, if I can say this, many men who are like, look, I'm fine. I'll just make my way through this.
Yep.
And I know that it's a bigger issue than just men, but particularly with mental health, it's the stigma that I don't want to admit to anybody that I've got an issue.
Right.
And so, I, the biggest issue with men is probably pride, which keeps
Mhm.
them from wanting to admit that we wrestle with something. But I think it's so important. So get professional help. Obviously, another thing you can do is talk to somebody who has seen professional help to say, hey, who have you seen?
Absolutely.
But give
But
us the
again,
website.
it's that vulnerability of admitting to somebody else that
Yeah.
you might need help.
Yeah. Give us the website one more time.
It's psychologytoday.com.
All right. Psychologytoday.com.
Yeah.
Okay. Here, Stevie, I want to say thank you. Um, I want to go through and give everybody the list of 10 one more time. And
Sure.
you check me. I'm going to do it in my own words. And
Absolutely.
you check with either a thumbs up or any additional color commentary. Number one, slow down. Number two, rest responsibly.
Hmm.
I don't think most of us know how to rest,
No,
even on vacation.
no. In fact, I have these last 2 weeks of the year off. And I found on my very first day, I was like, great, I finally have time to tackle my to do list. And for the first 2 days,
Mm.
I just ran like crazy.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, I'm supposed to have 2 weeks off to rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it took me a while to get into that mindset. So, yep.
Number three, turn off notifications. I mean, we've talked a lot about that.
Right.
Um, Number four, guard your sleep. I think this
Absolutely.
is huge. What routines do you need to establish,
Hmm.
even into next year, where you can prepare your body ahead of time for the sleep that you need? Number five, practice gratitude. We know what that does to your brain. Wake up each day just thinking about one thing that you're grateful for. It will change and rewire your brain.
And studies have suggested that when you practice gratitude right before you go to bed,
Hmm.
it actually calms your brain down so that you sleep better.
Wow.
So you might consider gratitude right before bed. What are one or two things I'm grateful for today
Yeah.
from my day today?
Awesome. Number six, learn to breathe. We learned the square. Breathe in 4 seconds, hold 4 seconds, release, breathe out 4 seconds, hold 4 seconds.
Mhm.
What a cool tool. Number seven, give yourself grace. Reframe failure. Give yourself grace. Number eight, take a break from social media and the news. Yes, it's difficult.
Absolutely.
But the
Yes.
reality is, you don't need to know what they ate for lunch. You don't need to see their pictures from today. And you don't need any more negativity in your life. Number nine, exercise. That doesn't mean run a marathon. It means move your body somehow. Go for a walk. Instead of talking on the phone in a stationary position, walk and talk. Do something to move even at your desk. And number 10, get professional help. Sometimes your recommendation earlier than you think you need it.
Hmm.
Get professional help. Well, Stevie, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for these simple ways to manage stress. I know that even in these end of the year times between Christmas and New Year's, and prior to that, it was Thanksgiving, and they all seem to bunch up here. What is meant to be this really time of celebration can become a really stressful time.
Right.
And now what I think is funny is we've even added like Black Friday to Thanksgiving. So we've pushed stress even back a month. And I just think that this list is incredibly practical. It's helpful. And to those of you who are watching and watch regularly, I just want to say, I hope that you will implement one, two, three, all of them into your routines as you go into next year. I think it'll be incredibly helpful. Stevie, any last thoughts, comments to people?
I just want to say thank you for having me as your guest, Chris.
Yeah, it was an honor to have you. I appreciate your wisdom, your knowledge, and your experience in dealing with the management of your own stress. Thank you for being vulnerable and transparent. We appreciate you. And to those of you who watch us faithfully, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Always About People show. We'll see you next time.